Welcome to another episode of the Cigar Ambassadors. I'm Bob Bylsma. This is my partner, Starr. Today we want to talk to you about why your cigar cut matters. Largely it's an issue of personal preference.
Absolutely.
But the cut that you put on your cigar will have certain impacts on both the flavor and enjoyment of that cigar. And we want to talk about how those dynamics fit together. So Louis, why don't you start us off by talking about what are sort of the benefits and drawbacks of the straight cut?
Well, in my honest and humble opinion, the straight cut is the more conventional cut that most people use. What it allows for you to have is an experience of a full flow of smoke on each draw from the cigar itself once you use the straight cut. And the caveat is you got to make sure that you're using a quality and very sharp cutter. Other than that, you're going to pull the wrapper and sort of snag it a little bit and destroy it somewhat, have the potential for it unraveling. You don't want the tobacco itself to be pulled. You want it to be precisely cut so that you get that opening in the cigar. And some of the effects from that cut, you will notice on most cigars a buildup of tar, but not as much because it's a wider gap in the opening of that cut. And that's usually used on your Churchills, some of your Figurados if you prefer the cut with that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more in detail. However, the straight cut is the more conventional cut, and again allows you to get a full flow of smoke on each draw from that cigar, so you can experience all the essence of the flavor notes on that cigar itself as you're smoking through it. And I'm sure, Bob, you can add some more to that.
Yeah, I think that as you said, no matter what cutter you use,
Right.
if that cutter isn't sharp, or in fact if the cigar isn't properly humidified,
Correct.
you risk cracking that wrapper.
Right.
The potential though with the straight cut is that you cut too much of that cap off,
Right.
and your cigar unravels.
Right.
I think the greatest argument in favor of the straight cut is when the blender blended that cigar,
Right.
he's not using a V cut or a punch.
Right.
So you're getting what the blender desired, and at the same time we know that everybody's palates are different, and so I think as we talk through this you'll see it's just a matter of personal preference and what you're trying to do with a particular cigar.
Right. And what I've been telling people lately, a lot of guys, new and some seasoned smokers, most seasoned smokers know how they want to use a straight cut. New guys, I had to kind of demonstrate for them the head and shoulders of cutting the cap. A lot of them cut beneath some cigars have a double or triple cap, but they cut so far down because they think that's what opens up the cigar itself, and they wind up cutting too much of the cap off. And then they get a mouthful of loose tobacco, depending on if it's short filler or mixed filler, and they're not really enjoying it. They're smoking and spitting out tobacco pieces. You don't want to do that when you're smoking, at least I know I don't.
But I find the loose tobacco issue to be an issue with a straight cut, even with long filler tobacco. It certainly has a greater potential for that than any of the other cuts we're going to talk about.
Right.
I think the issue you may have with the draw on a straight cut is you're maximizing the flow of air through there.
Right.
So if that draw is loose, it can end up being too loose.
Yeah.
One other benefit of the straight cut is if you have a plug,
Yeah.
and you have a tool to try to remove that plug as opposed to tossing the cigar, it's definitely easiest and most efficient to do with a straight cut. And one thing you can do if you run into a plug and you've done another kind of cut is put a straight cut on it anyway. It makes much easier to do with a punch than it is with a V cut.
Yeah.
But that's one alternative.
Okay.
Let's talk about the V cut. What do you see as the benefits and drawbacks of that?
Well, what I personally get from that is you get to channel the smoke on a V cut into a smaller space, if you will. It's not as large a diameter as you would get from a straight cut, but it concentrates the smoke into that V cut formation on your cigar. And what I've noticed, even on a torpedo, because I've seen somebody recently do that on a torpedo, a V-cut, and it was quite interesting. I've done it once. I can't remember the experience of how the smoking of that cigar changed up, but I would imagine that you're concentrating even more into that V as opposed to having the straight cut, and you get a lot more flavor channeled through that, as well as tar buildup, exact from what I've experienced. The V-cut you can use on a lot of different cigars. The challenge is on the box press. I've noticed that there are some differences in using a V-cut on the box press, because when you're smoking it, you have to make sure that you keep it sort of perpendicular, right? You can't, you're not going to enjoy it if you turn it and you have the V going vertical as opposed to horizontal.
Well, that's my issue with box press cigars, period. Because if you're trying to even out your burn, you may end up with it at a 45-degree angle in your mouth, regardless of the type of cut you have on it.
Right.
This just compounds that.
Exactly.
I think at the same time, you have the potential for increasing the draw, the difficulty of the draw. If your draw is too loose on a straight cut, you're gonna enhance that a little bit. With a V cut, you're going to intensify those flavors a bit. Probably going to provide a little less smoke, and I think all of those effects are enhanced as the ring gauge of that cigar grows. Because if you're putting a V cut on, I don't know, a Corona, you're not going to get much less surface area than you are with a straight cut. If you're putting it on a 60 ring gauge cigar, you're going to have a lot of difference in that V cut versus the straight cut.
Well, I would also go as far as suggesting to you guys that you try V cut on various sizes and various shapes of cigars, just to see what your experience is with that. Because I've seen people do it on a lot of different shapes cigars. I only use it occasionally. I prefer a straight or a punch. That's just my preference. But then I've seen guys use the V cut and do the Starr cut, and that's quite interesting because you're actually getting 4 different points. And one of those that I would love to hear what you guys, if you've done it, so let us know what your experience has been with that. I've not done it, to be quite honest.
So why don't you explain? The Starr cut is a double V. So we basically put it in the shape of an X.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then there's more, right? You have the punch, which I just mentioned, and Bob, I know that occasionally you would try a punch. What do you think? What do you get from using the punch on your cigars?
Actually, the punch is now my cut of choice.
Okay.
I like the aesthetics of it, and I think much of that is because I used to like the straight cut, and I could never cut straight enough, and I didn't like the aesthetics of it. Like the flavor of it. It will again tighten that draw a lot, and much more so with the change in the ring gauge size. It's going to intensify those flavors much more as that ring gauge gets larger. You do have the issue that you're going to burn that cigar a little hotter to try to draw it through there. You are going to probably produce less smoke, and you're going to get more tar. And I've found this more recently that it seems hit and miss in terms of whether that tar collection on a cigar really comes through and affects the flavor. And I have found that to be much more the case with a punch than with any of the other cuts.
Now, would that vary based on the strength of that cigar? It's a Connecticut versus a Maduro. You would get, I would imagine you get a little bit more tar buildup from a Maduro versus a Connecticut.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it that way. As I think through it, I would think the intensity of the flavor would probably mitigate against the impact of the flavor of those tars. So if you have a light cigar, that it would probably have a greater impact simply because the flavor of the tar is stronger than the flavor of that Connecticut. If it's a mild cigar.
Okay, well, some scientific experiments to try out, right?
Yeah, you know, the other thing I think that I would say about the punch is that the ring gauge does matter, because if you get below about a 44 ring gauge on a cigar, it becomes really, really difficult to use a punch.
Well, then it also depends on the size of your punch, right? Because there's at least 3 type punch diameters you can use. However, I would caution you to try to punch a torpedo or Lonsdale or Panatello. You just go ahead and cut that. You know, do a straight cut on that. You know, but hey, if you want to go out on a limb, go ahead, try doing a punch on one of those. You might successfully do it. However, caveat to you: if the cap of that cigar is a little brittle, if it's not humidified enough, you're gonna crack it.
And don't blame us.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one other cut. Let's talk about the 45-degree angle cut on a torpedo.
Love it, love it. That's a very, you know, I ran into a couple of people that actually prefer that cut over any other cut. They do the angle cut often. And what it does, similar to, I guess in my estimation, it's a combination of using a straight and maybe a V cut, if you put the two together, because you basically are angling the cut on a 45-degree angle and concentrating the flow of smoke in sort of a funnel.
I'm trying to put it on my palate.
Yeah.
Focusing that flavor on my palate.
But depending on how you turn that cigar, right, it's either going onto your palate, which is on the 5 points of your tongue, or it's hitting the roof of your mouth and then coming down, if you have it turned up. And as most smokers anyway, I do, as I'm smoking, I turn that cigar, rotate that cigar periodically through the smoke to keep the burn as even as possible.
Right.
But what do you get from doing it at a 45 degree?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
I have tried it a few times. You know, generally speaking, you're opening that up more than it was designed to be done. And we've talked about that in the context of other cuts as well.
Right.
So again, it goes to personal preference.
Yeah.
I suppose it has the potential to enhance something. I just haven't found that it does anything for me.
So your results may vary, but it does add a different aesthetic to the cigar itself. And I guess in most instances, depending on the cigar that you're smoking, you will, if you have that sophistication of picking up all the different flavor notes on your palate, you're gonna feel or experience some difference there, or not. It could just be an aesthetic thing. I've done it a couple of times, and to be quite honest, I haven't picked up any nuances from having that particular cut other than it looks pretty.
Well, it looks different anyway.
Yeah, okay, different.
Well, I guess if I could sum up what we have found in terms of the difference of a cut on a cigar, you're going to either increase or reduce the potential for damaging that cap.
Right.
You are going to enhance or detract from the draw of the cigar, which will affect your smoke production.
Mm-hmm.
You can either intensify or de-intensify the flavor of that cigar.
Okay.
With the punch and the V cut, you're reducing the potential for tobacco coming into your mouth and spitting it out. Have I missed anything in there?
No, I think you got it. Other than there's one savior to maybe not getting the flow of smoke that you need from a punch is you can always revert to a straight cut to just open it up.
Good point. What I'd encourage you to do is if you have a box of cigars, try each of the cuts.
Yeah.
And see what the flavor is and the draw is that you like.
Yeah.
You may find that what you've used, and I found this, that what I used traditionally wasn't what I actually preferred.
Yeah.
And so experiment with it, and let us know what you think.
Well, you got a lot of options, and I would say just again, to repeat what Bob has said, just try them with different sizes, different types, different cigars altogether, and see what you like, what actually appeals to you as you go through your smoking experience. And that's all we have for today, Bob.
That it is. We're the Cigar Ambassadors. Have a good day.